أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي صدق الله العلي العظيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So today we continue our series with the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Now just to show you the family tree, we covered Shuaib alayhi salam in the last lesson. And today we go on to number 14, which is Musa alayhi salam. And he had a brother, an elder brother called Harun, and he was also a prophet, so we'll do both of them together. And thereafter we'll go on to Zulkifl on this side, and his line of genealogy is not exactly known, but he is also the descendant of Adam alayhi salam ultimately. And then we'll possibly do Dawud alayhi salam if there's time. Now, just to explain this relationship between Shuaib and Musa, if you recall, Shuaib had two daughters that were sent out with some sheep of his to be fed with water. And at the well, it so happened that there were other men in the neighborhood or from the other farms that also came to feed their sheep, and they didn't give the ladies a chance. And Musa alayhi salam happened to be there, and he helped these two ladies feed the flock. And then he sat under the tree waiting for Allah to give him further guidance and assistance because he was penniless and homeless and a fugitive running away from the law. So essentially the story goes that one of these two daughters, whose name was Safura, later married Musa alayhi salam. So that's the link between Shuaib and Musa. And then we have Musa and Harun. They were both sons of Imran. Imran was the father of these two sons. So this genealogy of two sort of sons becoming prophets ran in that particular family. Okay, and so what we're going to cover is the shaded portion today, the four prophets that are colored in this little light peach color. Okay, then we look into the timeline. Now, these are some of the important events in terms of the birth of Judaism as a religion. If you recall our list of prophets we have here, ultimately it is Ibrahim alayhi salam, the sixth prophet after Adam alayhi salam, that gave birth to two sons. He had one Ismail and the other one was Ishaq. So Ismail gives us the Arab lineage of the prophets, and Ishaq gives us the Banu Israel lineage of the prophets. And from Ishaq we have the son Yaqub, and Yaqub had a son called Yusuf, and a few generations later came Musa alayhi salam with his brother Harun, and then after one other prophet in between we have Dawud and Sulaiman. So these are the 2, 4, 6, 8 important prophets in terms of Judaism's history. Now, what's also important in that history is the fact that this history spans from 1997 before Christ to 935 before Christ. So almost a period of 1,000 years that these prophets featured in their history. Where we get the idea of 12 sons or the 12 tribes of Banu Israel is from Yaqub alayhi salam. We all know that he had 12 sons, Yusuf and Binyamin from one wife and 10 others from another wife, and that gives you the 12 sons of Yaqub. And from here we get this notion of the 12 tribes of Banu Israel. Then we have Musa alayhi salam, who was born in the Banu Israel, living in Egypt along the banks of the river Nile, across the palace of Pharaoh, and he was one of the subjugated peoples of Cairo at the time because the kings ruled Egypt and had another tribe or group of people that were regarded as inferior, and they were the labor force for Pharaoh and Haman and Qarun and all the elites of the Egyptian nobility. And they used the Banu Israel to build all these magnificent projects that they built during that time, which is all those pyramids, the Sphinx, and all the other amazing monuments of the old world in Egypt, which you can still visit today and still see. Right, so it was during this time that at the end of Musa and Pharaoh's sort of era, that Musa was given the command to leave Pharaoh and to cross the Mediterranean Sea and go over to the Sinai side of the Arabian Peninsula and literally walk through the sea, right, under command of Allah. And he went with the Banu Israel. They joined him, and then that started the new chapter where the Banu Israel left Egypt for good and now on the Mount Sinai side and started a whole new life with Musa in their leadership position. And so during this time, this Canaan area is where Palestine is also located, and Palestine now gains significance in terms of the history of the Jewish people. Then we have later Dawood and Suleiman coming along. They were famous kings of the Israelites. They ruled as father and son for 70 years and 40 years respectively. And during Solomon or Suleiman's time, they built a temple, and they believe that the western wall of that temple is still what they call the Wailing Wall, which they worship at up to today. But whether it's actually that temple's remnants or something else's remnants, no one knows for sure. But the Zionists have been excavating for a long, long time using top archaeologists to try and claim that the temple lies below the Masjid al-Aqsa, and they're trying to find the reason to demolish the Aqsa and restore or rebuild what is called the lost temple of Solomon. So that's just a part of another history, but we'll cover that maybe on another time. All right, so this is in a nutshell the Judaism history of prophets and some key significant events that happened in this time. Right, we then move on to Musa alayhi salam. He ruled, or rather, he lived about 1527 BC. That's what when they say he was born. He lived for about 120 years in the region called Palestine. Uh, Essentially, he came to the people of the Israelites as well as the Copts. The Copts were the Christian church later became the Christian sort of grouping in Egypt. So essentially, he came about as and had to preach to these people. Right? He married the daughter of Shuaib, as we mentioned. And what is significant about Musa alayhi salam is this number of 136. He is the prophet alayhi salam with the most number of mentions by name in the entire Quran, which is quite significant. So his story is relayed in the Quran, in various parts of the Quran, in graphic detail, from the time he was born to his mother, and he was put into a cradle to flow down the River Nile, and right up to the end when the story of the wise man Khidr that is mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf. We'll come to that. So his entire story is mentioned in graphic detail in various parts of the Quran. So if you look at the map here, he was born in this place called Manf or Memphis, along the banks of the River Nile, which is the one side where all the workers lived, and on the other side of the Nile was the famous palace of Pharaoh and all his noble elites that lived alongside him, his army generals and the people that sort of subjugated the people on the other side. So his story starts as a little baby in the cradle with his mother just having given birth to him, and a few weeks later this instruction comes from the Pharaoh to say we should kill all the male-born young children because he saw in a dream that there was a male going to be born and he's one day going to overthrow the Pharaoh. So he felt threatened by this dream, and as a result, he gave that instruction to kill all the male children. So if you follow the black line here, so the first migration that Musa undertook was when he left the palace of the Pharaoh, and he went across basically in seeking refuge because he had killed a person in Cairo at the time, and he had to flee from the law with Pharaoh's sort of army of soldiers behind him. So he went all the way to Midian, where the story of the two sisters and the sheep that needed to be fed with water comes in, and thereafter he gets married to one of the girls, and then after about 8 years serving, that period of the marriage contract is over, he decides to go back with his wife back to to Egypt. So as he goes back, which is the second black line, he passes Mount Sinai. He sees a fire on the top. He goes to look at what's at the fire, and then that famous conversation with Allah occurs on Mount Sinai. And then he's told to go and approach Pharaoh and to tell him that, you know what, he must stop the subjugation of these people and let the people go free. So in any case, he goes back with that message to Pharaoh in his palace, and then the story unfolds there about what they did to the magicians and all the rest of it. And then at the end, he had to leave, as it were, once more. And this time he took some of the Banu Israel, whoever it believed in the new faith, with him. And this is the red line now, where he went across and he was told to cross the sea, which miraculously opened for him and his people to cross over. But when Pharaoh and his army followed, they got drowned in the ensuing tsunami that occurred. And then after they got over to Sinai, they wandered around the Sinai area, and they went past Jerusalem. And at the end, they ended up in a place called Jalad, where I think he is reputed to be buried, but no one knows for sure. But that's where his life sort of ends. But essentially, the Banu Israel were occupying this area of the Sinai and the area around the Dead Sea on either side. So if you look at this detailed story now we're going to the story itself. Uh, the story parallels that of Yusuf alayhi salam's story in many ways, in that they both had Canaan and Egypt intertwined in their history, and they both served either inside a court or under a king, and later became the king. And so we'll look at some of the parallels maybe later. So he lived in the age of the Pharaoh, who was a very despicable, arrogant tyrant of the day. And I mentioned this, that he feared the loss of his throne after seeing a dream in which he was overthrown by a young boy that was still to be born. So that's why he gave this instruction to kill all young baby boys, especially of the Banu Israel. So in any case, when the instruction came and the army were going literally door to door to find all the newborns, and if they were a girl, female, newborn, they left her. But if they were male, they basically took the boy away and disposed of it. I mean, they just killed the boy. Right? So Maryam, I mean, the mother of Musa alayhi salam felt very scared, and she didn't know what to do. And the Quran talks about the narrations. Allah says, feed the boy, and if you come to a point where you have nowhere to turn and now nothing else to do, put the boy in a little casket, like in a little basket, and just put him down in the river and let the river carry him away. Now imagine what fear goes to a mother's mind, that you got a casket that's not even waterproof, and what's the chances of the boy surviving? She was torn, like emotionally, totally disrupted. Right? But in any case, she followed the command, and lo and behold, that casket survived, and it went down the river Nile and ended up on the banks of the Pharaoh's own castle, and it was picked up. And the wife of Pharaoh at the time, when she saw this young baby, she just fell in love with him, and she went to the Pharaoh to say, please, let's adopt him because we didn't have children. And he also kind of, in a way, kind of agreed to allow this one boy to be saved while all the other boys were being killed on the other side. And this was a miracle of sorts, that Allah preserved Musa alayhi salam to be alive and be brought up right in the heart of where that command came to murder all male children, right, or male uh, newborns. So this is like the first infanticide in history that was carried out, right? And we have many parallels today with the genocide in Palestine, right, where there's a whole lot of things happening there as well, and where people in power can enact an infanticide or a genocide or whatever you want to call it, and kill not only tens and hundreds, but thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of people under with all the world watching and nobody being able to even do anything about it, which is very, very strange. Right? So it just shows, the parallels between how if Allah wants to save a person, he can do it despite all the odds. And likewise, if he wants to save the nation of Palestine, the Gazans as well as the Lebanese that are suffering today, Allah has got the power to even save them. So inshallah, they will be saved. There might be a bigger plan that we don't know of, but Allah is watching, like the whole world is watching, and Allah is the only one that has the ability to do something. We then move on to the next phase of his life, where, well, Asiya, the wife of the Pharaoh, while she was not mentioned by name, but she was a very virtuous woman, very pious, and she made a dua, "Oh Allah, grant me a house in Jannah," which is quite a strange dua because imagine she's living in the most amazing palace that was built ever in Egypt at that time, which was the palace of the Pharaoh himself along the Nile. And she was also the first lady of Egypt. So, in other words, anything that she wanted, everything was at her beck and call. Right? But on the other side, she had the most despicable of husbands, right? An arrogant dictator Pharaoh. So you can imagine these two things, how they played out. Now, having wealth and position does not make you necessarily happier, because this is what Asya faced, that she had all the wealth in the world. She didn't have any children, and that's what was lacking in her marriage. And now when the boy came, she was very happy and thrilled, and obviously her life changed as a result of it. Right? So even in that unfortunate position that she was in, we the lesson we take from this is that don't underestimate the power of dua. So no matter how oppressed you are in a relationship, or even in a community, or in a society, or even in a state, you might be the underdog, you might be the one that people spit on and totally oppressed. But remember the power of dua. You must still continue making your dua, and the dua of the oppressed is always heard, and you'll see results as a result of your request to Allah. Right, so the Israelites were slaves of the Pharaoh, and they created a stratification of society based on apartheid lines. Now we know racialism as we know it in South Africa. At that time, it was both to do with the color of skin, because some of the Egyptians had one tone of skin, and Banu Israel had another color of tone of skin, and on the basis of that tone color, people knew who they were. And obviously, the noble and the elites had the power, and they created this working class serving the upper class, that is themselves. Right? So this divide and rule policy is a classic one. It has worked in the past, and it's still continuing to work up to today. Right? But nevertheless, you find the miracle that's happening in the Pharaoh's court itself, where Musa was brought up as a prince in his own palace, under his very nose and his eyes. Right? And one day, as a youngster, very strong teenager, he's walking in the streets, and he finds that there are two people fighting or having an argument, and they're getting each other. So the one from the Banu Israel asks him for help against the other one, and Musa gets involved on the side of Banu Israel because they are the oppressed people, and he just gave that other guy one hard shot, and he floored him, and he actually killed him. He killed him by mistake. Right? So in a sense, he didn't mean to kill the person, but the end result was that Musa was a big, burly kind of a guy, and one shot just did the job for on this occasion, right? So the next day, the same man he saved the previous day was involved in another fight, this Banu Israel man, right? Which is always from his own type. So now he realized that, hey, this man is actually the problem, not the one I killed, and not the other people. Right? So again, yeah, he felt for something on the basis of perception, and he got involved. So in any case, now when he didn't want to get involved in the second fight, this man of yesterday, he announces, Musa, you don't want to help me, but you killed somebody yesterday, and then the news was out that Musa was the person that caused the murder of the previous day. And that's why the army then got involved, and they decided now what they must do with this guy Musa. Now they decided to kill him and then take his body to Pharaoh to show him, what, they've disposed of him as a person. But they didn't want to bring him alive because they thought that maybe either Musa's, the Pharaoh's wife, Asiya, or even the Pharaoh himself might have some sort of inclination towards this boy because they bring him up as a young, their own adopted son in their household. So in any case, somebody came to tell Musa, you know what, you better disappear from this place because people are out to get to you because of the killing that you've done. And what he does is he then leaves the palace and heads into the unknown. He didn't know, obviously, there were no GPSs. He didn't even know there was a place called Midian. He just left it in Allah's hands to direct him to a way out of this sure, end result for him in terms of going to prison or being killed. So, in any case, he went in the direction of Midian, and he arrives at this place where, from a distance, he sees these people feeding, the sheep and all the rest of it. Now, what we learn from this story is that, sometimes the fiery nature of youth, we need to subdue it. And the only way that can be done is through good upbringing within a family environment. Tempers need to be controlled, especially strong, muscular men, teenagers that got young blood in them. They shouldn't just jump into what is called other people's fights, right? We must always know the facts before getting involved in any way, because sometimes what appears to us as who's right and who's wrong, and we just jump to the conclusion, we get involved on the wrong side, and that could be the end of us. Now, in Midian, the story carries on where the two girls were standing aside with the sheep. The men did the feeding of their sheep, and then they left. And then the girls obviously had to now go later and bring the sheep down and bring them to the water and feed. And Musa alayhi salam saw this happening, and he went there to assist. He thought two ladies in distress here, and he could help, and he was strong and muscular, so he did it quickly, and he gave the sheep the water, and they were on their way, and then he left them to go, and he sat under a tree and made a dua to say, "Oh Allah, I'm destitute, you help me." Right? And what happened is these two girls go back to their father. They report to him what happened, and they even say, "You know what, this man looks like an upright, honest man. Please employ him so that we have an extra set of hands on in our farm to do the work that he can actually do for us." And with the process, one of them, uh, the father suggested to Musa, after listening to his story, he says, "No, you're safe in this area. And also, I would like to offer one of the two girls in marriage to you." And he chose him because of his honesty and work ethic. And Musa agreed, and the contract was signed for 8 years. So this is the only story of a marriage proposal in the Quran. Maybe there's advice in here about qualities to look for in a partner. And sometimes we need to give even the homeless, the destitute, the fugitives from the law, if they are good people, a chance to get married as well. Right, then the story continues. After 10 years, he decides to go to Egypt via Mount Tur or Mount Sinai, where he saw a flame in the mountain, and he goes up to in search of the flame, and there Allah has a conversation with him, and Allah tells him to throw down your staff, that stick that he used to tend the sheep with, and he noticed the staff, that stick turned into a serpent like a snake, and he was scared, and Allah said, "Don't be scared." He made the serpent turn back into the stick, and then he said, "Also put your hand under your shoulder, and it will turn white, even though you don't have any disease." Then he said, go to Pharaoh and tell him to submit to a greater being, Allah, and to let the children of Israel be freed from the yoke of oppression. Now imagine what a weighty message he was given just after this brief meeting with Allah, and Allah placed on him such a heavy burden. Now imagine the burden, because look at what he has to do. It's almost like a real impossible mission, right? He must go to tell Pharaoh on his face what the message of Islam is, right? Submit to a greater God than you claim to be as a God. And telling him in his own palace to let the people that he subjugated go free. Now imagine all this, it requires a lot of pluck and courage and fortitude and strength. Now, this is where the few ayah that I read whenever I open my classes about Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. It's to do with this was the same thing that he read. That was actually his dua. Rabbi shrah li means, oh Allah, expand for me my breast. وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي, and make for easy for me this mission that I'm on. وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي, and untie the knot in my tongue, because he wasn't a public speaker. In fact, he was known to stutter, but and obviously facing Pharaoh, he would stutter even more. So he couldn't give the message over fluently even to Pharaoh. وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي, so that people may understand. So this is a famous dua that people read whenever they facing a public sort of speaking engagement experience. It's nice to read it, even though silently, so that you as a speaker on the stage, you don't get stage fright and you're able to address the crowd and say the message the way it should be said. All right, so essentially he went there and he went with the message and he said what he had to say. Now, Pharaoh regarded Musa to be a mad person. He says, how dare you even say such a thing? Because he asked people to believe. Musa came on the message that he's telling his people to believe in another God besides that of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was insisting that, no, I am the God of the people of Egypt. And people know that and they worship me. Right? So Pharaoh observed these two miracles, the staff in his right hand once more. And then he thought, well, this guy is also a magician, besides being mad. He's, let's call the top magicians of Egypt to a duel of sorcery. In other words, let's see who's stronger. Is it Musa that comes out stronger, or these sorcerers that we have tried and tested and know their art and the craft very well? So, in any case, they come and they have this duel, and they throw their sticks and things jump and move and amazing things to behold. But when Musa threw his staff down, that staff swallowed up all that evil magic that the other sorcerers were able to do. And the sorcerers, when they saw this happening in front of their eyes, they realized that Musa came with a genuine message. They simply bowed down, they prostrated, and they said, we believe in the Lord of Musa, which is Allah. Now, obviously, Pharaoh didn't take kindly to this because he brought them here to show that Musa is weak, but meanwhile, these guys converted in this process. Right? And it enraged Pharaoh, and he promised to crucify them and kill one, chop off one hand and one leg on alternate sides of the body as a mark of his power over them. But they didn't bother. They said, you know what, if you have to kill us, we'll die as shaheed, basically, because we have now accepted the message of Islam. Then we have this other person, Qarun, was also a nobleman, very extremely wealthy and arrogant. He refused to give any charity, and his wealth was swallowed into the earth as another miracle that happened during Musa's time. Now, this is Mount Sinai right on the top, where you enter through Sharm el-Sheikh, and you can hike up there. It takes about 5 hours at night to reach the sunrise time right on the top. And there's a little sort of mosque or cave that Musa alayhi salam used to pray and seek guidance, and that is where it's believed that the Torah and all the Ten Commandments were actually revealed to him on the top of Mount Sinai, uh, uh, and that's where it happened. Okay, then looking at what the three claims that Pharaoh made, he suffered from delusions of grandeur, and he was so proud he took himself to take three qualities. One is to be the Rabb, the Lord of the Bani Israel. Second was the Malik, the king over all the people of Egypt. And the third, which was beyond belief, was the Ilah, and as I'm the supreme being and the supreme God of all my subjugated masses that I'm reigning over. Now, these are various citations from other parts of the Quran, where on one occasion he tells his people, I am your exalted Lord, Rabbukum al-Ala. On another occasion, he tells his people, do you not see me? I am the king of Egypt, and these rivers, the river Nile is flowing beneath my feet. I mean, can you not notice, do you not observe how great I am? And on the third occasion, he says, oh, my noblemen around me, that I don't see for you any other ilah besides me. In other words, worship me. Now, you can see These three qualities are actually reserved for Allah alone, as we notice in Surah An-Nas. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It says, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, malikin nas, ilahin nas. So what we have to say is in people is where I seek protection in the Lord of humankind, the King of mankind, and the Ilah, the deity or the God, ultimate sovereignty of the authority of Allah of mankind. So Allah alone possesses these three attributes, and how dare any man in his right frame of mind claim this to be his prerogative? I mean, he doesn't sustain anything. He doesn't give life and cause death. He doesn't create. He didn't create any of the systems in the universe that are functioning so effectively and proficiently. So obviously, this is something that if somebody has this notion in their head, they're obviously tyrants of, of a hyper ego kind of a sense, and they need to be brought down to size and dealt with one way or the other. And Allah chose Musa alayhi salam to deal with this tyrant. So the story goes on that obviously he had a hyper ego and he had subjects serving him in every way, and all of them just had to say Ya Abbas and agree with what he had to say. Then it moves on where the Banu Israel, who Musa alayhi salam came to sort of liberate from the clutches of Pharaoh, where some of them converted to the Islam brought about by Musa alayhi salam, but the conversion was not very wholehearted. They were not like firm believers in what Musa alayhi salam brought, the message he brought. And so many mishaps befell the Banu Israel, even while they were still under Pharaoh's domain. And they experienced at times of famine. Then Banu Israel will run to Musa and say, you know what, please make a dua to your Lord to save us from this famine and give us food again. And Allah allowed that to happen. And once the famine was over, they forgot Allah and they carried on their ways. Then another occasion, a flood occurred, and they again went to Musa, please, you know, make a special dua for the floods to subside and our life to return to normal. And that happened. And again, they reverted to their old ways. Then there was a locust plague and an outbreak of lice and frogs, and the river's water turned into blood. Now, these are all the different miracles that happened in Musa alayhi salam's time and in trying to save the people of Musa from all these things. But having done all that, they still were not like totally committed to the cause that Musa alayhi salam brought. Right? And finally, Musa alayhi salam was given the command that, you know what, the army is going to come behind you as well as your followers. So just leave Egypt, go in the direction of the Red Sea. And Pharaoh and his army were going to follow them. And we know the story that he was able to cross because the waters opened and they were able to cross over. And when Pharaoh's army entered the water, they were engulfed in the water with a tsunami. Now, Pharaoh's body was killed. Pharaoh was killed, and obviously his body was floating and as a dead corpse, and it got washed ashore. And normally they would bury the person, but this one, the people decided to mummify it. And this was also by divine providence, divine will, where Allah made it happen such that he allowed that particular body to be embalmed in such a way that the features of the man still can be seen up to today, some 4,000 years after the event. So it's a stark reminder to all the dictators of today that, you know what, if you are going to be showing arrogance and being a dictator, one day your lot can also be what was the lot of Pharaoh, right? And he was always referred to not as a king in the Quran, but and not by name, but only as this generic title of being called Pharaoh. Okay, we then move on to one of the other miracles in Musa's life when he crossed over to the Canaan, where there were 12 different tribes or families with him, and each one was like kind of requiring water for their needs. So Allah made it possible for Musa to strike the rock, and 12 different springs gushed forth in different directions. And each branch or tribe of the Banu Israel was then catered for with their own watering sort of source. But people being people, they soon wanted a variety of food, and later on they even went so far as even denying monotheism, and they wanted an idol to be made out of gold. So this is the golden calf that the Samiri made for them out of relics or gold jewelry that each of them carried when they left Egypt. So, in any case, when uh, Musa alayhi salam goes to Mount Sinai again with a group of elders, and they went with a mission to say we wanted to see God. Now, when they were on the top, when Musa left Harun, his brother, with the people to say, look after them, this bolt of lightning struck as a sign from Allah, and Musa fell down in a swoon and survived. After being unconscious for a while, he came around and he realized that he just experienced the shan or the greatness of God, and he couldn't actually see Allah with his naked eyes, because if he could have just seen, like, he couldn't even see the lightning, leave alone see Allah. So Allah is not like visible, or it's not visible to the naked eye. And obviously, even if he was, then the naked eye won't be able to last. You'll probably go blind as a result of seeing such an amazing light that Allah is. Allah samawati wal ard. All right, so those elders that he came with, they were all killed by the boat. No, so it just shows how men quickly deviate. Where he's shown a path, but we always go against the path that is shown. We know the right way, but we go off the track, and we're always looking for other. And this is how Shaitan also ploys, in our minds, and creates this diversions for us. So while they were supposed to be monotheistic, but they needed continuous reminders that no, the calf is not what you worship. You worship Allah who is unseen. Right, and then we have the actual Ten Commandments. Now, if you look at the commandments, I won't read them all, but the first four talk about Allah and His uniqueness and monotheism, that you cannot make images of Him like idols of any sort, and there's no other gods before Him and after Him, and you shouldn't take Allah's name in, for vanity purposes, right? Number five is about remember the Sabbath day. Then, if you look at 6 to 11, it has to do with just how you should lead your life, the pure life that all the religions teach us. Honor your parents. Also, don't kill people without any just cause. Don't commit adultery. Regulate your sexual affairs. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness when you are asked to stand in a court of law. And don't be selfish and only want things for yourself. Be generous and give to others as well. So essentially, these are the pure beliefs of the Jews that still believe in the pristine form of Judaism, that this is the way to go. Right, then we go on to the last incident in Musa's life, where Musa was once asked by somebody who is the most knowledgeable, and he replied that, well, it was himself. And Allah was not pleased with that answer and asked him to go in search of another learned man called Al-Khidr, and you'll meet him at the parting of the two seas. So in other words, you're going to make a trip, a long journey somewhere, go towards where two seas like kind of meet or part or whatever. And so in any case, he goes with the slave on this journey to look in search of Khidr to find the wisdom that he has to offer. So after he agrees, he meets Khidr at that point, then Khidr tells him, I'll teach you something, but provided you don't ask me any questions about why I'm doing anything. So Musa agreed to this. He thought it's easy for me. I'll just keep my mouth shut and listen and we'll see what you're doing. In any case, on the trip, Khidr first of all damages a poor man's boat. Now, Musa couldn't resist the urge of asking Khidr, now, why did you do such a thing? This man is poor and the boat is his livelihood, and why did you do this? So Khidr reminded him, he said, you know what, I told you, don't ask me questions. Just keep quiet and all will become evident to you later. So in any case, he promises not to ask again, and they carry on the journey. The next place he stops, he just goes out, Khidr goes and kills a young boy, and to what appears to Musa for no apparent reason. Again, he couldn't urge, and he asked, why you did that? He says, you keep quiet, don't talk. Then they carried on the journey. This time, he built a wall for the community, a wall that was broken down for some orphans that were living in that house. And he just did them a favor. And then after he did the favor, they were both hungry, both Khidr and his mom. Musa and his slave. So Musa tells Khidr that surely we should have at least asked them for giving us some food because you did all this work for their community, and surely as a reward they should at least feed you or feed us. So this was just too much for Khidr. He said, "Now I'm going to tell you what's the significance of these three events." And then he explained the whole thing about the boat was part of a tyrant king's acquisition strategy of seizing all boats of poor people. So he damaged that one boat just so that the king wouldn't seize the boat, and later it was easy to repair, and the poor man could then still survive using that broken, dilapidated boat, but at least he had a boat. Then the boy was killed was due to a dua of pious parents who made a dua for pious offspring, and because this boy had gone astray, Allah, the dua was that Allah must remove this boy there was no hope for him, and replace him with a better child, another son that will perhaps be more obedient and pious as the parents wanted the person to be. Then, as for the wall, it was built to protect young orphans' inheritance from being used by the community. So there's like a pot of gold under that broken wall. So all by building that wall like firmly, he just ensured that for 20, 30 years at least, that wall or what it was protecting below it, that inheritance will remain for those young orphans. And once they grow big, then obviously when they find it, then they can use it appropriately without it being stolen by the other people of the community. So, all in all, these are wisdoms that Allah sometimes sends other servants of His in your path or in Musa's path to teach him, even though you, like Musa alayhi salam, thought he was the most knowledgeable, but look at what he learned through just going through with Khidr. And we also learned that Allah is obviously the all-knowing, and He's got a better plan. And sometimes we don't know what His plan is, and He will execute His plan when the time is right and in whichever way He pleases. He's got the entire forces of nature, the angels and the malaika and the jinns, everything at His will, and all He has to do is say kun fayakun, be, and it will be. Right? So let us not lose hope when things look so dire elsewhere in the world, with all these genocides going on in Sudan and now in Lebanon and even in Gaza. But inshallah, there will be a way out, and Allah has a bigger plan. And obviously, He's used this time to even expose the leaders in the Arab world as well for who they are and the role they either played or didn't play in terms of the support of the oppressed people of this world. Right, and the final story part in Musa's life was about he ordered the people of Canaan to join him in overthrowing a tyrant dictator. And because the Banu Israel were not prepared to fight, the land of Jerusalem, where this tyrant dictator was forbidden to them for 40 years. And they wandered aimlessly for 40 years. This side, that side, Sinai, Iraq, Egypt, wherever. And that's where you have, when we talk of the diaspora of the Jews, this is when it started. This was the beginning of it, where they didn't want to follow command of Allah. So Allah said, well, no, go ahead. We don't need you. We'll still fight. The tyrant dictator will still be overthrown through other means. And you guys go your own way and see what you make out of your life. And that's how the Jews today have been all over the world, the diaspora of them. They scattered all over. Right, so when we disobey Allah, we can be left to meander through life without a purpose, and we are taught to come back to Him, take heed, and therefore seek guidance before it's too late. Right, the final thing is this picture of Nabi Musa Maqam in Masjid. Now, Maqam in Musa means the place of Musa, or an area where Musa perhaps lived at some time, at some point in his life. And if he died there, then generally the Prophet is buried also where he passed away. And there is a grave there, but people are not certain whether it's actually Musa's grave or not. But essentially, what history does record is that he was in this area and he did live here, perhaps at this time, and people just built a mosque to commemorate his presence in this place and sanctify and make it the holy place that it is. So this is presently in occupied Palestine. If you ever go there, you can visit once you cross the Allenby Bridge on Jordan side. It's very near there. Please do visit that place. Right, so this is basically the story of Musa alayhi salam. And I think I've just covered a little bit of this glimpses into Islamic history of my own history book that I've written. In chapter 11 covers a synopsis of the creation of Israel. And the summary that I've given in that book, over only in a few pages, it's well worth reading. It's still relevant today, although I wrote the book about 20 years ago. So it's available for free, and you can download it from the Google Drive link to this course. It's there with your lecture notes available for your perusal. So we'll stop there. Sorry, I went over time, but we completed at least Musa alayhi salam story. So we'll end with the recital of Wal Asr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.